Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me for Pilates All Levels. My name is Audra, and today we're going to use a ball as a prop. If you're at home and you don't have a ball, no problem. You can take a pillow and fold it a couple times. You can put a yoga block in between your knees, or you can get rid of the prop entirely. It's not a make or break kind of situation. As always, listen to your body. Don't do anything that is contraindicated or not right for you. And today we're actually going to begin with a little bit of mobilization, because when we try to stabilize, if we have something that's really tight or restricted, it's harder to stabilize against it. So we're just going to do a little bit of mobilization to start, and hopefully it'll be even easier to find our abs and stabilize against like movement. So we're going to begin on our knees and just kind of check in, right? So notice if your back is trying to help, or if your ribs are popping or your hip bones are diving forward, and just see what your body says. And slide one foot forward. Yeah. And we're just gonna, without letting the hip bones dive forward, we're tucking the tailbone, pulling the ribs backwards, and sliding this front knee forward a little bit. Now, if the ribs pop or the hip bones dive forward, it's not the end of the world, but it is definitely our muscle trying to shorten. And then just with that front foot, push yourself back. We're going to do a few of these to start finding the movement without a ton of like force. Press it back. Just a couple more. Good. And maybe as you're doing this and just telling your muscle, hey, you can go into this range, maybe you're starting to get more range of motion. Maybe you still hit kind of a roadblock, and that's fine too. Last one, we're gonna hold. So hold it at your end range and then pull back 5%, 5% only. Yep. Now, the same side hand as back leg, you're gonna use to find extra tension. So take that hand, place it on your front knee, and using your armpit muscle, press down into that knee. Good. Hopefully you feel a little bit more tension throughout. Okay. Big inhale. Big exhale, just stop pressing. Okay. Now, think about your knee. We're going to push the knee down and forward as if we're trying to come into hip flexion. Hopefully you feel that muscle start to light up a little bit, right? Yeah. And then inhale. Exhale, just relax. Good. Now, think about your foot. We're going to push down into the foot for 5, 4. Hopefully you feel this in a slightly different location. You might feel it more in your quad. Big inhale, big exhale, relax. Yeah. Now, all we're going to do is rotate from our hip bones. Our whole body is going to come along for the ride. So rotate your hip bones towards that front leg. Let the thigh bones slide back. And then let your hip bones rotate the opposite way. Your whole body comes along for the ride. Only go into a range that feels okay in your hip. And back and forth. And just notice if one side you're like, oh, that's a stretch. Or if one side you're like, oh yeah, that's actually super easy. Rotate. Good. One more. Now, especially if you're at home, if you need to hold on to something like a couch, no problem. Come back to center. We're actually bringing our hand down to the ground or close to it. Opposite hand, or the hand that's closest to your front leg, is going to sweep up towards the sky, rotate, and then come back down. If you need to prop yourself up on a yoga block, no problem. We have just a couple more. Trying to get movement through your thoracic spine, so those ribs. Last one. Good. And then press, lift yourself up. Bring both hands forward. Yep. Now slide your same side as front leg forward, or as you rotate open, looking at that back hand. Yeah, and back. So now it's less about the hips and more about the thoracic. So try to keep your hip bones relatively forward as we rotate. So as you rotate, if your back tries to help, keep your ribs closed. Don't try to go into quite as big of a range. So we're trying to get our obliques to help us rather than our erectors. So right there, ribs towards your belly button a little, like this. Yeah, there, good. Do you feel the difference? Yeah, last one. It's subtle, but it can be kind of a lot, yeah. And then I have wonderful news, other side. So I'm just gonna turn this way. Good, so we start with the tuck, right? Closing the ribs, drawing the belly button through our spine. And just see where your end range is, right? Once we get to the point where we have to arch to get farther, we've gone past our pure hip extension, and then come out of it. So quads and hip flexors tend to be chronically shortened because one, it's easier for us to access things in the front of our body. And then two, if we're doing things like sitting a lot, they're already just being held in a shortened position. So finding some length will help us actually access the back. Last one, and we hold. Come out of that full range 5%, same side hand as back leg, place it on that knee, thinking about your armpit, press down. So what we're doing is we're creating tension at other joints, but it will help that hip relax. Inhale, exhale, just stop pressing. Then we bring awareness to our knee. So think about the knee pressing down and forward as if you're trying to come into hip flexion for 5, 4, 3, 2, big inhale, big exhale, just stop pressing. Maybe you get more range. Then we bring attention to our foot. So same thing, you're just gonna press down to light up that quad a little bit. For 5, 4, 3, 2, big inhale, big exhale. Good. Now, all we're gonna do, think about those hips rotating and the whole body comes along for the ride. So rotate towards that front leg, thigh bone slides back, rotate off the leg. Now, as you rotate off the leg, try to keep the knee lined up with that second or third toe, and then rotate. Everybody's hip joint is shaped differently, right? The positioning of our hip joints, like forward or to the side, the depth of our hip joint, it's all different. So if you can go much farther than me or not as far as me, that's okay. Don't go into a range that doesn't feel good. Good. And then come back to center. Hand comes down. Other hand will sweep up so we can rotate through our rib cage here. And then back down. You might also feel a little stretch in the glute, depending on if your glutes tend to be a little tight. Give me a couple more here. And 2. And then come back to center. Come up. Now keep the hips relatively forward and we rotate the opposite way. And back. Good. Couple more. Rotation is really important, especially for things like walking or running. 2, Last one. Good. Come all the way onto all fours. If you want to be on your fists, that's fine. I'm going to take my hands off of the mat because they don't love the squishiness. So pushing into your big or your pointer finger, we're just going to push the floor away, round our back up to the sky. And just notice which part of your spine is moving more. And then sink it the opposite way. And just notice which part of your spine is moving more. Good. And one more. Sometimes we tend to really, really round through our thoracic and our lumbar doesn't do much. And then sometimes when we go the other way, our lumbar is more likely to do the extension and our thoracic doesn't do much. So I just want you to check in without judgment. Last one. Now come back to center and we're just going to articulate. So keeping your head and shoulders right where they are, let your tailbone melt down like Salvador Dali's clock. Then lift your hip bones, lift your belly button, lift your bottom ribs until you come into your full flexion position. Now keep your thoracic spine and head and shoulders right where they are. Unwind. So you're going to widen through your sits bones, let your hip bones melt forward and slowly creep up your spine until you can look slightly forward. Right, so unwind, stick your butt out. Yeah, good. And now we're reversing it. So once you're in this position, nod your chin, push the floor away so your ribs lift, and then your bottom ribs, lower back, melt your tailbone down. And then keep your lower back there as you draw your shoulder blades down, widen your collarbones, sink everything down. So if you've ever used one of those wooden snake toys, right, where it kind of, that's what we're trying to do with our spine, right? We're going to do one more each direction. So just let the tailbone melt, belly button up, 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 lower ribs, push the floor away, and then widen through the sits bones. Hip bones come down, articulating up the spine. And then we nod, hollow and roll, push. This should feel good. If it feels chunky, that's okay. Just let each segment that can move, move. Good. Then we're going to come back to neutral and just look towards one side. We're making a little rainbow shape. And then other side. You can start letting those hips go away from you as well. So when you side bend to the right, you can press your hips to the left if it feels good in the hip joint. Last one, each direction. All right. Now just roll it up so you're standing on your knees and see if you hopefully can stand a little more free than you did at the beginning, right? If you tend to have this kind of like lifted posture of your diaphragm, see if you can lower it. See if you can make sure that your pelvis is in your neutral. And we're coming all the way onto our back, grabbing your prop, popping it between your knees. Now first, let's just take 1 second to breathe. Bring one hand to your sternum, one hand to your low ribs. And just inhale in through your nose for 4 counts. Exhale through your mouth for 6. As you do this, start to notice which hand is moving. In an ideal world, if I was to videotape you from like the sternum, throat, and face, adjust your inhale, and I was to like rewind it and watch it, I shouldn't be able to tell when you start inhaling, right? We want that bottom hand to do most of the movement. Top hand stays relaxed. Now, is that to say we never let the hand elevate? We never come into that like extra space breathing? No, no, no. But where we are right now, we don't need it. We're not running a marathon. We're not about to give a really important presentation. Just let yourself relax, let your nervous system relax. Last one like this. And then bring your hands to the sides of your ribs. You can bring your thumbs to the back or your fingers to the back. It's up to you, whichever more comfortable in your shoulder. And as you inhale, inhale wide into your hands and low. And then as you exhale, exhale away from your hands. Notice how that can help your abs start kicking on, right? Letting your rib cage move allows your abs to just start doing their job without force. Now, as we breathe, on your exhale, think about squeezing the prop and sinking your abs down. And we're not changing the shape of our spine here, so we're not imprinting yet. It's like you've got a corset muscle and the corset is just being tightened on your exhale. Last one. Now go ahead and interlace your hands behind your head. Spiral your elbows forward, shoulder blades melt down your back. Now on your exhale, you're still going to sink your ribs down, you're still going to hollow everything out, but then you're also curling forward. So think about curling from your collarbones and your armpits. Yeah, hands come forward, push them into an imaginary surface to curl a little higher. Yeah, hands come back behind your head, maintain that position. That looks great. How's it feel? So good, right? Now, try not to let the ribs pop. We're keeping them down and we're just lowering our head an inch. That's it. Now, reconnect. Make sure the ribs are integrated. They're drawing down. We're just lowering our head an inch. That's it. Good. And again, and again, and again, until our head comes down. Notice how the abs then are still active. Yeah? Good. And then again, exhale, curl forward. Hands come forward, push into your imaginary surface. Good. Hold, and then try to keep those ribs integrated on the way down. 2 more. That imaginary surface is just to maybe cue a little bit deeper flexion, but it's definitely to just get more muscle work, right? So if you already have a really mobile spine and you're up pretty high, you don't need to come up so high that you come into hip flexion, right? So if you're like, but I'm already really curled, that's fine. It's more just an idea rather than necessarily having to get your body to move. We get to hold this last one up. Good. Now, as we breathe, try to breathe low to create buoyancy. And we're just going to squeeze the prop. Good. And relax the prop part way. Exhale, squeeze. Now, as we exhale and squeeze the prop, if you can, activate the arch of your foot, like lift the arch of your foot. Yeah. And see if that helps you get even more ab control. 2 more breaths. Yeah. And hold. Now, all we're going to do, think about those rib cages. It's going to rotate to point to the outside of your thighs. And then back to center. If your foot cramped, you can let them relax. Yeah. And then other side. Now let's go ahead. We're going to rotate, hold, and then bring one hand forward so we can kind of see where we're going. Yeah. And then back. Beautiful. Other direction. And just see where we are. And again. How are those obliques feeling? Great. Good. Good. Couple more. One more each side. Keeping both hips nice and still. And come all the way back down. Nice. Now we're going to find our hip bones. You can do this with your hands or just your mind. And find your neutral pelvis. So neutral pelvis is where your hip bones and pubic bone are on one plane, and you have the natural curves of your spine, right? Everybody's spine shape is different. And all we're going to do on our exhale is imprint. So you're letting your back melt into the ground. You pull your hip bones a little bit towards your face. If you clench your buns to get there, relax them. Where it's not a huge tuck, it's just a small movement. And then rock your hips back to center. If you feel the front pocket of your hips, right, the hip flexor region, think less about getting a huge imprint and more about just relaxing and lengthening through that area. And then you can come back to center. Couple more. If you have a spot of your hip flexor that's like ding, 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 you can use your thumb or your finger to just kind of cue it to chill out a little bit, right? Doesn't have to not work. We just don't want it to go into that like aggressive, like scared ropey activation, right? Last one. Now, using the same kind of ease through your spine, come into your imprint, hold, press down into your big toe mound, and peel your spine up as if you're peeling a sticker off the wall. Now, first one never counts. It's kind of like you're checking in. So maybe you move your feet closer to you. Maybe you're like, oh man, I feel my back. In which case, hollow out through the front of your body. Make sure you're pressing in with your big toe as opposed to squeezing the top portion of your glutes. I want your weight on your shoulders. Inhale. Exhale, melt. And roll all the way down. And then we can peel back up. Lengthening through the hips, through the knees, and melt and roll. Good, just a couple more. Now, as you do this, if for any reason you feel tension on your knees, you can try changing your foot position, right? So maybe you need your feet farther away from you, in which case I would say maybe your quads are a little tight. Or maybe you need your feet wider, in which case I would say potentially that TFL might be overactive. It could also just be that you have a structural thing that requires a different position. So don't feel bad if your knees need to be in a slightly different position than mine. Maybe deep knee flexion isn't for you even just today, right? Last one. Bringing it all the way up. And then all the way down. Now just let your knees gently sway to one side. If your back arches, think about that hip lengthening away, ribs sinking back, and then inhale, exhale, drawing your ribs down to initiate that return. And the knees go to the other side. Same thing. If the back starts to arch, think about the hip lengthening away, ribs sinking back, inflating, and then bring it back. Just one more each side. Trying to find that abdominal connection in order to initiate that spinal movement. Come back to center. Now you can be in a goalpost or a T position, but whichever you're going to do, I'd like you to gently push into the floor so you have a connection to the floor. Now lift your feet to your tabletop, squeeze your heels together, keep the ribs drawing down. We're coming into supine spine twist. So hold one side. Exhale, drag it back from your rib cage. Good, other side. Hold. Drag it back from the rib cage. Good. Keeping the opposite shoulder nice and heavy here. Back and forth. Good. Hopefully feeling that nice oblique connection. But I will say, supine spine twist, as great as it is, and it's awesome, it should feel good on your back, it should help you connect to your breath and your obliques, it can sometimes be hard to find. So if you're like, I don't really feel my abs at 100%, that is fine. Come back to center. Hands interlaced behind your head. Curl forward. Good. Now, kind of imagine you've got a tennis ball in between your knees. And we're going to try to not drop or squeeze the tennis ball. Curl forward a little bit more, up a little higher. Yeah. And we just let our toes point towards the ground because our knees are moving away from our face. So put, yeah. And then let the knees come back. Yes, that was beautiful. Keep curling towards your knees here from your ribs. Imagine you've got a string on your sternum that's just being pulled. Yeah, good. Now, if at any point you need a break, of course, take a break. And squeeze on the way up. Yeah, couple more. Nice. Good. If you feel yourself start to sink into your shoulder blades, bring your hands back. Yeah, good. Couple more. Last one like this. Now, if it's appropriate, you can always put your head down, right? If you need your head down, no problem. On your next one, we're going to just imprint your spine, curl your tailbone towards your face, and then come back, right? So you tap, and then imprint, and then curl a little bit. Maybe you get pretty high, maybe you don't. Now, if that feels good and you would like to be in a chest lift here, you can always level up by curling your chest forward, pausing when your knees and elbows get close to each other. And then again. Now, as we do this, it can be tempting to really try to feel like I want to get height, I want to get a big curl. But honestly, if you just think about starting in neutral, maintaining neutral, and then using your imprint here with a little curl, you're not going to get range at the expense of the muscle recruitment, right? So 2 more. Last 1. Bring your head down, feet down. Take the prop, set it to the side, and go ahead, place your hands on your thighs, and just at 5 to 10% of your ability, press your hands into your thighs to make sure that you just have a little bit of traction through your hips and your back. If you press at 100, there can be that spring back, so just allow a small press. I'll slide 1 foot out long. But now you can keep your head down here, or you can lift it. Either way is great. On your, press down into your heel so your hamstring starts to activate a little bit. And then on your exhale, you're going to imprint your spine and then come back to neutral. That's it. So with the head down especially, it can be a lot of stretch on that quad if your quad is tight. But just check it out. Notice if you have to bend your knee or something to be able to get there. If you're in your chest lift, fantastic. It will be way more oblique, right? So you're just imprinting and then coming back to neutral. 2 more. Last 1. And then the other side. So whether your head is down or up, they're both great, right? So just imprint, you're sliding possibly that heel towards you, and then neutral, right? Imprint, neutral. If your chest is lifted, fantastic. Sinking the ribs down either way to help with that imprint, yeah. Couple more. Last 1. Now extend both legs out, head down. Good. Now, just hands on your hips to see if one side wants to imprint differently than the other, no big deal. So let your low back kind of melt towards the ground and then back to center. This is a big indicator of if maybe your psoas is tight, because it is hard to get that imprint. So hands come to the sky, arm bones relax down. Let your arms go overhead. Bring them up, curl forward as you inhale. Exhale, imprint your spine and roll forward. Yeah, nice. Now reach your hands forward towards your feet. Maybe you get to your feet, maybe you don't, maybe you get to your shins. Think about pulling your armpits down your back and lifting your ribs a little to the sky. Good. Belly button draws back as well. Now, roll back 1 bone at a time. And of course, that first roll up didn't necessarily count. But finding that neutral, inhaling to help create buoyancy, exhaling as you roll. Good. And just notice what your legs and feet want to do, right? Maybe they're like, yeah, I got this perfectly still, no problem. Maybe you need your feet a little wider in order to comfortably get up. Maybe you need to bend your knees a little in order to comfortably get up. Maybe you need a pad underneath your low back. All of these are great, right? So if, for example, you need the pad underneath your low back to allow your spine to sink down, it's just bringing the floor to you, right? If you get to a point and you're like, I'm stuck, I can't do it unless I wrench, take a breath, Feel free to use a leg. Or if even that's a bit much today, an easy way to get up is let yourself roll to your side and press yourself up. Okay. Last one. We're coming all the way down. Hands come back behind our head. We're coming into our chest lift again. Now, looking at our feet, I want you to think about that thigh bone connecting to your ribs. You're going to push one foot away. It might act like it's going to hover, and that's great, but it doesn't have to come up high. And then other side. Push it away, and it's going to act like it's going to hover. Now, if as you do this, you straighten your knee more to get your foot there, keep your knee soft, right? We're trying to push from our abs rather than go into more knee extension. I know it's a little awkward at first, but if you imagine your feet are against the couch, you just want to push the couch away with one foot. Yeah, curl a little higher. Yeah, and then you're going to push the couch away with the other foot. Yeah, but without letting your back move. So it's stabilizing from your rib cage. Yeah, good. Now slide one foot in, bring it to tabletop. Good. Now push the other foot away and it's going to hover. Yeah, and you can rotate towards that front leg. And then switch. You're going to push, 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 pull, and then push, push, push. Yeah. Few more. Now, if for any reason your body is like, not today, guess what? You can tap. You can bring your head down in between. Or you can even just use your hand if flexion isn't your friend today. So if for any reason you're like, hey, flexion isn't what I would like to do, think about your opposite hand pushing into your leg from that armpit to find that extra connection. But yeah. And I love to do that even with chest lift, right? Because you get a little bit more muscular recruitment with that innervation. A couple more. And 2. Last one, each side. Come back to center. Let's bring our head down and our hands forward. Now, if you're in tabletop, imagine pushing your feet into something so the back line just kicks on a little to help stabilize you. You can also squeeze your inner thighs together as if you were popping a balloon. Now, if you need your feet down, it's also great. Sometimes I get more out of it with my feet down. So we're just going to start pumping our arms and notice if the rib cage moves, right? So your only job is to breathe wide, exhale, narrow, see if you can keep the rib cage from having to move with the arms. Yeah. Now maybe you're like, okay, feet down, great. I want feet up. Fantastic. If you're like, oh, my quads, bring your heels down a little. No problem. Maybe you're like, I want my chest lifted. Fantastic. Reach forward from your collarbones as well as your fingertips. Maybe you want to push your feet away and come into full 100. Great. We're still inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Last set. Good. And hug your knees towards your chest. Gently rock from side to side. And let your thigh bones stir in the socket. So go ahead. find a little bit of freedom through that movement. And then other direction. 2. Go ahead, bring your hands behind your thighs or on your shins. Press your legs into your hands, lift your chest, and just start rolling like a little pill bug until you come to seated. Nice. We're going to bring the ball behind us. So this is a perfect moment for a pillow folded a couple times. We're just going to let ourselves come into some upper back extension here. So bring your prop behind your thoracic. We're going to have our hands behind our head. Yeah. So on this first one, we're just seeing like what it feels like to relax everything. You might want to scoot away from the ball this far. Yeah. Good. Now on this first one, just relax. See where your spine moves from. Right? I have a lot of movement in my thoracic, but I don't have a lot in my lumbar. But most people have a lot more in their lumbar rather than their thoracic. So just notice what part of your spine got the movement from. And so your job is to focus on the opposite one, okay? So exhale, curl forward, pushing the ball away. Yeah. Now, slowly extend. Imagine that gravity is really pulling you and you're going to let it win tug of war, but not without a little bit of a fight. And just notice which part of your spine wants to get that movement. See if you can encourage a different section of your spine to get that movement. And then exhale, curl forward. Ah. Good. Little at a time. Good. You don't have to go all the way down, especially if it doesn't feel great for you. Good. Now, if you feel excited about this, you're like, I would like more abs, please. You can always float one leg up as you curl forward and then let it come down. And then other side. Or you can always bring both legs up and you tap. Few more. Whatever your body says feels the best today is what I'd like you to listen to. I'm going to bring my feet down because that's what it's saying it would prefer. And 2. Last set. And extend and just relax for a second over the prop. Now go ahead, come all the way up. And while we're here, we're going to move the prop out from behind us, hands behind. Now, you can have your hands facing forward or out to the side. My wrists prefer out to the side. So think about first just sinking down so your shoulders can come up without force. And then you're going to push the floor away and then slide your shoulders towards your ears. Yeah. And then push the floor away. So do you feel how your back is arching just a little baby bit? I think if you bring yourself closer to your hands, yeah, and then just push towards the sky with your shoulders and then close your ribs a little. So it's like a plank. Yeah, good, right there, gorgeous. Last one, hold this. Now, first we're just gonna widen our feet a little bit. Let one knee go to the side, other knee comes across, yeah. And then let that knee go out to the side and then other knee come across. Yeah, we're just getting a little bit of external and internal rotation with a little bit of shoulder stability. And notice maybe one side has a lot more range than the other. Maybe they're pretty evenly matched. Maybe they have a lot of internal rotation and not much external rotation, or vice versa. Good. Last set. And bring yourself back to center. Now, toes point forward, push down into your feet, lift your hips, keep your point. Good. And then slowly hip hinge down. Now, maybe you're like, okay, this is a lot, but I got this. Great. Maybe you're like, I want more work, in which case extend your legs out. Think about lifting your kneecaps up your quads, press down into your feet. You're doing a reverse plank and slowly lower. For 3, 2 more. Oh, my hand is slipping. Last one. Hold. Slowly come down. We're going to go on to all fours. Now, with this, if you would prefer to be on your fists or your forearms, no problem. Find center. So your shoulders are over your hands, hips are over your knees, widen through your collarbone. And just find your neutral. Tuck one toe under, slide that foot out. Push, push, push through that heel. Yeah. And then let it fold in. Now, as we do this, as we go back and forth, it can be tempting to let the hip drop or push back with our hands, but we're trying to keep everything nice and steady. Good. Last one each side. Now slide one foot out, hold. Slide that other foot out to meet it. So you're in your plank. Tuck your tailbone under a little bit and lift your belly button to the sky. So think about, look at me real quickly. Lift your belly button and hips, not from your ribs, from your low abs. Like I'm coming and pulling your whole hip complex up. Yes, now tuck your tailbone under. There, gorgeous. I know it's up a lot higher than it feels like it should be. Yeah. And then you can bend one knee, another side, if you want. Yeah. Give me that tuck again. Yes. Do you feel how your abs immediately do more work there? Yeah. 2. Last one. Knees come down, press into a little rest position, rolling out those wrists. Right. Now we're coming back onto all fours. I'm going to be on my forearms because my wrists are tired. And I want you to slide one foot out. Now ignore that leg. It doesn't exist anymore. We're going to sink into the other knee and then press to come back. I'm going to show this from a couple different angles. So we're basically sinking into this hip like, oh, I'm so tired. And then in order to come out of that, we're going to push the knee down and out to typewriter our hips back to center. Good. So do you feel how that side glute then kicks on a bit? Good. And then sink into it again. And then press that knee down and out to typewriter your hips back to center. One more. Hold that. Lengthen through the crown of your head and just start to float that other foot up and hold. So it doesn't need to be up really high. In fact, sometimes that will get our back to do more work. So pretty much just push it straight behind you. Now, just for fun, we're going to take your toes, point them in a little bit, and then tiny little lifts and lowers. Good. Think of the glutes kicking on. Think of the abs kicking on, right? Because the glutes are trying to take the leg back in space, but our back is also trying to take our leg back in space. So our abs are telling the back, hey, you're not going to work. So it makes the glutes work more, right? 3, 2, we're gonna do tiny little circles. Think about just stirring the inside of a giant peanut butter jar. 3, 2, and just reverse your circle. And come back to center. Other side, so slide that leg out and ignore it. The leg no longer exists. Now we're gonna sink into that hip and then push down and out to typewriter our hips back. Hold for a second, find that side glute, and then we do it again. So we just sink and then push and typewriter back, right? Hold for a second. And then sink and then push to typewriter back. So now that side is already active, yeah? And then we just float the other leg up, pushing it away. And just for fun, let the toes point more internally. And just tiny little squeezes. Once again, it's not about height. We want to make sure the back is being stabilized from our core. And just think about that glute engaging. The glute is what's going to be in charge of the leg. Okay. A few more. And then we do little baby circles. 5, 4, good. Once again, the foot is stirring in the peanut butter jar because the glute is telling it where to go. And then reverse your circles. 3, 2, 1. Bring that knee down. We're coming onto our side. Now, you can always be down here with your head supported, or you can be on your elbow. So either way is great. We're gonna unwind our hips. If you're on the ground, feel how those bottom ribs are gonna try to sink down. You're gonna lift them up so I can slide a sheet of paper underneath you. If you're on your forearm, you're gonna push the floor away, lift the ribs. So if you're on your hands, it kind of puts your neck at a weird angle. So I would say if you're gonna be down, no problem, just support your head or be up here like that. And then lift the ribs just a little bit more. Oh, yep, like you've got a candle underneath you. Yes, good. Now, all we're gonna do, widen through the sits bones, A-B duct. Yeah, and slowly lower. Good. A few more. Now, if you feel the front pocket of the hip rather than the back pocket, couple things you can do. 1, bring your feet back a little bit. 2, let that knee be slightly higher than the foot. Good. Good. Keeping those hip bones pointing forward as opposed to letting them come along for the ride, right? Okay. 2. Last one. Hold. Push the foot away from you. So much so that the hip comes along. Yeah. Now, flex the foot, let it float forward, hinge forward, yeah. And then drag it back as if you're dragging it through like mud. And then back, forward and back. Now notice what your hip bone does, or notice what your ribs do, right? So a lot of times, if we're in that erector dominant posture, they're trying to roll. So keep the ribs drawn down. Think about the back line kicking on and the front line just stretching. 2. You might have to shift forward and back against gravity, but that's okay. Last one. Good. Now bend both of your knees, press down into that forearm, and lift your hips into a tiny little side plank. Now maybe this is where you live, and that's great. Maybe you extend that top leg out. Maybe you extend both legs out. We're just gonna breathe for 3, 2, 1, other side. Good. So once again, you can always be down here, or you can be here. Either way, lift the bottom ribs, find that nice connection. Good. And then we just start with that abduction. So hip bone comes forward, widen through the sits bone, and abduct. Now, if that hip hikes as it lifts, try to send it away. So we're trying to get glute as opposed to back doing the work. Yeah. Good. Are you feeling back here instead of front? Great, just checking. Sometimes it can be tricky, right? Like, especially if the TFL is like overactive, the glutes like, I don't want to, and it'll like just give the job to the TFL, and the TFL is like, sure, I got this. Yeah. 2 more. Yeah. Exactly. Good. And then we're extending that leg out. Push, push, push. Good. Then we can hip hinge. Drag it back. Once again, pay attention to what the back or the hip are doing. Good. If we get that leg pretty far behind us, that's okay. We just want to try to keep that hip bone still, right? As opposed to it diving forward. Gorgeous. 2 more. Last one. Bend your knees, press into the ground, push your knees into the ground, come into your little side plank. Now, maybe this is where you are. Great. Maybe you extend that top leg. Maybe you extend your bottom leg. Otherwise, we're just going to hold it for 3. Hold for 2. Hold for 1. Good. Coming down, we're coming onto all 4s real quickly. And we're just going to get a little bit of rotation. So take one hand, we're going to slide it underneath, rotate, and then rotate back to center. Rotate down, rotate back to center. Couple more. The elbow of the hand that's attached to the ground is going to bend. And then other side. This should be pretty easy rotation as opposed to the more intense controlled muscular rotation. Last one. Come all the way up if you can, come through downward dog. Walking your hands towards your feet or your feet towards your hands. And just roll all the way up. We're just ending with the teeniest bit of balance work. So bring heel to toe, like you're on a little tightrope. So if you're on the squishy mat, that's great. It's just harder. So if you're like, ooh, so feel the floor underneath you. Then think about squeezing those inner thighs a little bit. And if this feels pretty stable, great. Close your eyes. Or one eye, if both is too much. If that's too easy, turn your head to one side, and then the other. One more, and then we get to do the other side. Good news is the other side might be your easy side. The not great news is it might not be, right? So this is my really challenged side. So I might not be able to like close my eyes and turn my head. That's okay, right? So just see how you feel. Maybe try closing your eyes. Or one eye, right? If you turn your head, great. I can turn my head with one eye closed. Or I can close both eyes. But as soon as I start turning my head, it's a problem on this side. So just be aware, your sides may feel different, and that's okay. Last one. come back to center. We're going to flip your palms up to the sky. Open your collarbones. Lift your heart. Come back to center. Slide your shoulders just up to your ears. Inhale. Drop them straight down. Nice job. Give yourselves a round of applause. Awesome work. Thank you so much for joining me today. Nice job.